Probably the single most important environmental externality in the world is global warming. The Earth is heated by the sun. The sun produces heat, which passes through our atmosphere and warms the Earth's surface. Some of the heat bounces back. The Earth simply radiates it back into space. But a large portion is trapped by certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide and methane, which reflect the heat back to Earth again. This phenomenon is called the greenhouse effect, because a greenhouse works by letting in sunlight and trapping the heat produced from that light. The greenhouse effect is essential to life. Without it, the Earth would be about 60 degrees cooler, and life as we know it would end. The problem is that human activity has been increasing the amount of carbon dioxide and methane in our atmosphere. So over time, more and more of the sun's heat gets trapped, and as a result, the greenhouse effect has gotten more powerful. Why is this happening? Because we burn fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are a fundamental part of everyday life. Burning coal, oil, and natural gas gives us electricity and gets us from place to place. But when we burn these fuels, it releases carbon dioxide. Since the Industrial Revolution, which took place in Europe and the United States from the 18th to 19th centuries, the amount of burning of fossil fuels has exploded. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now at its highest level in 400,000 years. At the same time, temperatures have increased dramatically. Indeed, just since 1951, temperatures have risen by more than 1 degree Fahrenheit, the most rapid increase in the last 1,000 years. Many scientists predict that over the next century, global temperatures could rise by as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The global sea level could rise by almost 3 feet, increasing risks of flooding and submersion of low-lying coastal areas. Some scientists project, for example, that 20 to 40% of the entire country of Bangladesh will be flooded due to the global warming over the next century, with much of this nation being under more than 5 feet of water. Right now, 150 million people live there, and the average Bangladeshi makes under $1,000 per year, so moving somewhere else might be quite difficult. Overall, estimates suggest that the world as a whole will be 10% poorer by 2100 from human-induced temperature increases. And it isn't just that the world will get hotter. Global warming also raises the odds of extreme weather events. Since 1970 alone, there's been a 75% rise in extreme hurricanes. This is a classic example of a negative externality. When you use fossil fuels like oil or coal or gas, you add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, contributing to higher temperatures. But did you think about this last time you filled up your car? Probably not. You just wanted to drive to the store. You didn't worry about causing a temperature increase that your children or grandchildren will have to deal with. That means your private marginal benefit of using fossil fuels is above the social marginal benefit, since you don't account for the negative effect on others, like those poor folks in Bangladesh. What can the government do about this? As we discussed in the lecture, one approach is to restrict the emissions from fossil fuels, either by producing less of the goods that create emissions or moving to more efficient technologies to produce those goods with fewer emissions. Another approach would be to tax you by the amount of the negative externality. For example, we could tax all the uses of fossil fuels, such as gas in our cars or coal that produces electricity. Both approaches have advantages and disadvantages. But so far, there's been little government effort on either front. Partly, this is because global warming is a worldwide problem. Emissions from anywhere in the world contribute equally to producing global warming. So if one country moves alone to reduce its emissions, it helps some, but isn't nearly enough. We need the whole world to contribute. For this reason, policymakers in the US and elsewhere have adopted the approach of trying to achieve worldwide agreements to reduce emissions. Every few years, countries get together to try to agree on how they might limit the emissions of fossil fuels that contribute to global warming. But these meetings have so far been only moderately successful. Partly this is because it's been hard for countries to agree on how much of the burden each country should bear. On the one hand, the US is the bad guy here. The US is responsible for the vast majority of emissions that are now in the atmosphere causing global warming. On the other hand, going forward, economic principles would say that we should reduce emissions in the places where the marginal costs of doing so are smallest. After all, if you have multiple firms producing a good, the most efficient way to produce it would be to have the lowest cost firm make the first units, then the next lowest cost, and so on. That way you minimize overall costs. Well, similarly with reducing emissions, The most efficient would be to have the lowest cost countries do the reductions first. And these aren't the US, where we already have an economy built around expensive fossil fuels. Rather, this would suggest focusing our efforts on developing countries like China and India, who are currently building their modern economy and could build up in a way that minimizes the use of fossil fuels. But China and India don't want to do this. They say rightly that the global warming problem is one that the US and other rich nations made. So why shouldn't those countries fix it? So in the end, we have an equity efficiency trade-off problem here. The places where it's most efficient to produce can argue that it's most unfair for them to bear the burdens of the developed world's past mistakes. It's a double whammy, an externality problem that when you try to solve it, turns into a question about equity and efficiency. But this isn't just a theoretical problem. This is a deadly long-run issue, and we need to figure out a solution to this problem.